Welcome to the second part of the Trackmaking tutorial, and today will be a little bit better because now we're actually going to do something. So first off, we're going to go over the raise tool up here, what that does. I'm just going to press left click and we will go over and see. So as you can see, it created something right here, a pretty big bump, you could say. If we go into the editor, you can see here that there's like two edges, one here, one here. If we do this again, we have another thing here with two edges, and it is basically the inner circle and the outer circle. So the inner circle is going to go max height, while the space between the inner circle and the outer circle is going to go like a smooth gradient. So if we set this one to, let's say 1 and make another one, we can see it's not as high, and we can make another one with 0 just for reference. So here we have 3, 3, 1, 0. So we can see here the 3 is the same height, and here's the 1, and here's the 0. So we can make another 1 here, just showing with 0 focus. So let's set this to 1. So you can see it's all smooth because there's no highest point, so there's just like a smooth gradient all over the place. But preferably we don't want this on track, so we're going to delete them, and you're doing this by pressing the back key. Press that a few times and it will delete these. So the back key applies to changes you made to the ground. It doesn't apply to tile map or decals or statues, so be careful when you use it. And just for the sake, we can set this to 1 as well and make 1. That wasn't very clear, so let's crank it up to 3. As you can see, it's just a straight edge, so you're just running straight into that. So let's delete these two. And the lower works exactly the same, except it's lowering. I can turn it down. So there's a hole. And the smudge tool is made for kind of bulldozer or something. So if you drag here, you're kind of pushing the dirt. You can't really see it that well now, but you're pushing the dirt. So let's undo that. And smooth does smooth. Made 3 times there. So as you can see, it's smooth on this edge now where I smoothed it, and there's still the sharp edge there. So those are the tools: raise, lower, smudge, and smooth. Also, with smooth and smudge, it is, if you have it set to 0, the focus, it's going to go most in the middle. Yeah, it's going to be strongest in the middle, but at the same time it's going to create smooth on the sides, so it won't be some edgy. So if you have like this, for example, the inner circle is going to go full straight smooth, but the outer one is going to get a little bit. So let's move on to the fun part, which is making jumps and berms. So we want to have a gradient, and I'll explain in a second what it is. So we want to press new gradient. We can get this circle with a line and 2 points or dots, or what do you want to call it. So this is pretty much an area, a distance that we are going to do something on, and we have a gradient edit. As we can see here, we get a a lot of linear options, and with these we can create jumps. I prefer to make my gradients so the middle point is where it's supposed to start and the outside point is where it's supposed to end, at least when it comes to jumps, because it's just easier to paint in this direction when you're doing the jump rather than do it backwards, kind of. So let's see here. We will now form a jump just by doing a quick look. This looks pretty good. No, it doesn't, because it's 30 feet tall, this jump. So what we're gonna do is we want to flatten this, so we press flatten, or you can press F on the keyboard, that's the same. And here we have a linear system, so each thick line represents 10 foot and each thin line represents 2.5 foot. So let's say we're starting out here in this edge, we go here, this is 2.5 foot. Here's another 2.5 foot, which is 5 foot from the first point. Here's another 2.5 foot, that is 7.5 foot. And here's another 2.5 foot, which is 10 foot. So that's how this works. So each thick line is 10 foot and each thin one is 2.5. So let's delete those and get into. So I usually set a line here at the bottom, close to the one at the edge. And why I do this is, if you would have this one up here, as soon as you paint outside of the gradient, you will paint this height, and that's not what we want to do. So let's zoom in, let's set this one here, and we want to create a smooth jump, so we want to have this segment type to smooth or curve, just me messing up. So let's see here, face of the jump, it could be about 30 feet, that's not too unrealistic, and about 10 feet tall. It's a pretty high jump, but you get the idea. So here we have a nice smooth curve. And how long should it be? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 foot perhaps. It's a pretty long jump, at least in real life, but this is a game. So we want to change this one to curve, because we want a smooth landing. We want to set this one, this point here. But as you can see, it does go underground, so we want to have this line, so we'll line it up. So we have a takeoff and we have a landing. So let's try this out. Now we have two options. We can either go with the linear paint or the linear add. The difference is that linear add is adding to the current surface, no matter if it's high or low or a hill or whoopies or whatever. The difference is the linear paint represents to the ground, which means this is the bottom ground, or like 0 foot elevation. You can have it down here, you can have it up here, but the linear paint is always going to go from where these points are, which means if you're at an elevation of 50 foot, which would be about this high, I guess, then you would want to add, because if you would use the paint, it would paint from 0 foot to 10 foot while you're painting the area that you paint. But if you use the add one, it will add. As of right now, we're on the flat ground, so it won't matter. But we're going to use the add. So, and left click, just drag, and there's a jump. And this one says update needed. I'll come into that a little bit later. Just going to go to jump. So obviously we want to try the jump and see if it's a good jump. Otherwise we'll have to remake it. So let's see here. Oh, it was a nice one. It did feel pretty good. You could land it pretty well. So I'll stick with this. But as you can see here from my tile map, I messed it up. So You can see I painted on the side here, and it's not very good. So we're going to remake this one. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's make the inner circle about the size of the track, a little bit wider. So let's see here, because we want to have a nice slope from the inner circle to the outer circle of the jump. So let's paint it here, and let's see. Whoops, that doesn't look too nice, and we want to have a straight line. So let's delete this one again and place it, and make sure to place it before the gradient, because if you place it here, you can see this part right here is round, and we do not want that. So let's delete that one too. So now it's aligned good. So we want to press the L key and then drag the gradient along the gradient here, along the line and along the track. And when we reach the end, we want to left click with our mouse like this. That creates a line. And this one says update needed, which means that it needs to update the buffer memory. So we will press the U as for update. So that updates the buffer memory, so you won't get any weird shapes. You can like have half the jump, but the terrain is there, so you can ride on top of it, but you really don't see, and it can just be really weird. So that's how to create jumps. And let's move on to make a berm. So I'm just going to make a little bit better corner. So this looks a little bit smoother. Let's for making a berm, gradient placement, new gradient, and of course you can reuse this one, just flatten it and use it again, but I'm going to make a new one. So let's see here. Now we want to have a little bit inside of what we painted, and we want to have it follow along the corner well. So if I look at this now, I can see that it follows along pretty good. You can even have it a little bit bigger, depending on what you like, but this one follows along the turn pretty good. And now we want to drag this one out just a little bit more to create a nice slope on the outside. And first off, we're going to set this point here, as of here should the berm start. Then I like to do this. Here should the berm kind of end. This is the top of the berm. So let's zoom in here. I can see that this one is below ground, so let's fix that one up. Also, we want to have a line, and this is just a preference how you want to make the berm. Either you're going to use only like smooth gradients and use this, or you can set this one to line, so you have this nice flat area on top of the berm. I'm going to go with this one because this looks pretty nice. And then we can see that we have a nice slope on the backside too. So, and this time we want to use the linear one. We will use the radial add. And the same goes here with the linear paint. It paints from the gradient and it doesn't add to the current surface. So we want to have a pretty big radius. We want to set the focus to 0. And then we want to make sure that our circle covers the whole turn, which it does, and then we want to left click once, like this. Once. And you can see it created a nice berm here. It says update needed, so we'll press U. So let's see how the berm looks. And this is what I was talking about with the berm, or the buffer needed to update. It's probably due to my recording right now, so let's press U once again and see. Sometimes you may have to exit the track and go back into it. So it's a pretty nice berm. It's not the best, but it's a nice one. At least it's a smooth one. So you can come up here and ride along with it. Okay, this so nice frames here. So let's go back into the editor. What we could do too is we could paint a little bit, like starting off here, and if we want to have a little bit longer max height, or if you can say that, You could paint along, but don't do that for a too long distance because that will look ugly. And also make sure that you paint at the highest point of the berm, otherwise it will be pretty weird. And since you're having zero focus, it won't really have a highest point to go after, so it can really easily become choppy. So update needed, we'll press U as for update again, and let's try this section again. So let's see here. As you can see, it looks pretty ugly once you're supposed to exit the berm. So you may want to keep that in mind, that it's preferred to not paint along a berm, but paint once. So I'm going to do this the right way in my opinion, or as I think of especially this particular berm. So one click, press update, and I think this one looks pretty good. So that's the basic technique of a berm and jump, and I'm going to cover this once again a little bit later in the series, because you can do this in other ways that are more efficient, or they just suit the situation better. So look forward to that. And also don't forget to save. It's pretty important, so try to save as often as you can once you're happy with something, because once you've saved and done like 10 new changes or smooths or whatever, you can't really go back. So save once you're happy. I'll see you in my next episode.